Hello and welcome to yet another video. This is the 6th episode of the series in which Naruto confronts the reality of shinobi life. Following the battle at the bridge in Wave, Naruto turns a new leaf and begins training seriously. Please like and subscribe to show your support. Let's get the show started. The three figures moved through the snow-covered forest with a great sense of urgency. White hooded cloaks covering most of their bodies, equally white masks covering their faces. They were seemingly silent as they moved, like three shadows sweeping through the forest along with the rising sun, none of them leaving as much as a footstep or a broken twig in their way. Mitarashi Enko gave a long sigh, easily heard by the other two over the radio. They were at it since before dawn, which was nearly 4 hours ago. She still vividly remembered the briefing Jiraiya gave them last night, along with the orders to prepare their affairs for an extended leave of absence. For one reason or another, Tsunade was spotted by my associates in the north-north, within the ruins of the former Whirlpool Kingdom. Thankfully, I have a few contacts there, so we should be able to track her down once we get there. However, we are going through neutral territory once we cross the border, which means we're open to attacks from anyone, mostly Iwa and Oto along with the occasional Kumo squad. Takigakure is mostly peaceful, and they have very little interest in the ruins of their neighbor, unlike the others. Besides that, we'll be making a 1-week break before we reach Whirlpool for training. For both of you. The mission should last a month, 2 at most unless something goes wrong. She had good reason to worry, because unlike Naruto, she constantly monitored the reports about the states of other countries, something that most experienced shinobi did. Whirlpool was a lawless land, mostly consisting of smaller villages with usually no more than 5 to 10 families, and of course the ruins of the one glorious capital city, Nadara. Everything else were either bandit camps or Iwa and Oto outposts, none of the three good choices. Both she and Naruto perfectly understood that going there meant going under the cover of night, and keeping away from any larger population center from the point when they leave the Fire Country. Thankfully, she had packed for a long trip, and with Naruto's help in planning, they had sufficient equipment to prepare and arm a small battalion. Not to mention enough trap material to stop said battalion. It's official, Naruto is a preparation freak, she silently mused as she kept jumping. Naruto was unusually calm. The news of their destination utterly silenced him, as a combination of growing interest and curiosity, and fear of what he would face entered his mind. Ever since he was a child, Naruto learned that not having the equipment to protect yourself was a fatal error, and when carrying literally weightless equipment, there was no such thing as over-preparing. The interior of the white coat was lined with storage scrolls, containing enough weapons, tools, food and medicine to sustain them for the better part of 2 months. Common sense is a useless commodity in the world of the ninja, he silently mused as they kept jumping, his mind going back to his prized possessions. The silver ring that Enko gave him, a pledge in return for the amulet he gave her. He immediately thought of Haku, wondering if the boy would agree with his decision. The sword Quicksilver, safely sealed inside the seal on his palm. The leaf Hitayat given to him by Irika. His mother's blade, the 2 scrolls, the Hiratian kunai and finally the codex. Each an object of great personal value, each a symbol of what he was, of what he represented, of what he believed in. His mind was now focused on his mental list of goals, most of them concerning improving his skills or Anko in one way or another. A part of his mind went to Gaara, worried if the boy would survive the oncoming chaos. For some reason he had a feeling that he wouldn't be home for a while. Surprisingly, Jiraiya wasn't thinking of porn. Well, at least surprisingly to those who didn't know him well. Like most veteran ninja, he needed a release of some sort from the daily horrors of shinobi life, and for him it was his perverted tendencies that kept him sane. For Tsunade it was Sake, for Kakashi it was Ika, for Guy, his youthfulness, the list goes on. Jiraiya was currently focusing on the mission he and the other two were taking. Whirlpool held some painful memories for him, memories of his own failures in times past when the squad he led failed to reach the royal family in time, saving only a young Kushina from the court before it was overrun. His contacts had spotted Tsunade and Shizune heading towards the rebuilt city of Nadara. Although the place was a shadow of its former self, its population was slowly growing of the trade routes they managed to establish with their neighbors, exporting their masterfully crafted art and tools, along with refined ore, while using a good part of that money to create a standing army. Kyumo and Iwa didn't have the time and resources to fight against them, so the small city-state survived and grew. And to top it all, there was Kushina's fate. While he never wanted to say it out loud, a part of him always doubted that she died in the hospital, as no body was ever found, and another part suspected that someone was involved in making her disappear. Shaking his head from the thoughts, he focused on the matters at hand, reaching the point of the 1-week break on their voyage, a small valley to the north, right next to the border. A safe place where it would be possible to rest for a while, and where supplies were abundant over the entire year, as the entire valley was heated by a subterranean lava flow, the small river within it keeping a warm, almost body heat temperature which in turn kept the entire valley comfortably warm. They kept moving at great speed, even as the snow kept falling. Naruto kept the team away from anyone else, using the highest range of his radiance combined with his chakra tracing skills to avoid anything larger than a wolf. The 3 white blurs kept moving northwards, avoiding any signs of life, and keeping silent on the way. And so it went for the next 8 hours, before they would reach their first stop, only to rest for half an hour and then proceed to the second leg of the journey to the border valley. 10 o'clock, Konoha ANBU headquarters, TNI Division Prison. Gaara sighed for probably the 100th time since he was imprisoned. He couldn't really complain, the treatment was a lot better than he would have expected. The cells were relatively warm, he had food and drink, even being left a few books to keep him entertained, along with a decent light. It was surprisingly comfortable, most likely a benefit of his cooperation. He had also been told that the rest of his family had been granted similar living quarters by the ANBU, who seemed to be surprisingly non-hostile. Not that he cared much, opting to remain generally cold, but polite. Having a good night's sleep did wonders for his demeanor. There wasn't much left of the sweet boy he was years ago, but there was enough humanity left in him that a kinder man could be born. With just a hint of a smile on his lips, he sat next to the chakra-suppressing bars of the cell, waiting for the man he remembered as Tiger to come and take over his watch post, and join him for a game of shogi. The whole situation made little sense to him, but then again, his life rarely did, and he learned to go with the flow over the years. His only thoughts right now were what was his first friend doing, how was his family coping with their imprisonment, and contemplating what the blonde enigma told him about true strength. Naruto had a strength he could not comprehend, and on scale that was unknown to him. That final thing he did just showed him how weak he actually was once his shield was beaten. He kept on wondering why he thought so much of the future when he was imprisoned, and most likely awaiting execution. Then again, the world worked in strange ways, and if there was one gift he had received from his insane tenant, it was the foresight madness had at times. It told him that things would get better. Up for another game? Came the rather calm voice of Tiger-san, of course. Are you ready to lose again? Gaara replied stoically as the older man pulled out a shogi board and a small bag with the figures, chuckling at the boy's response. Thoughts of the future could wait, for now he had a game to win. In a cell nearby, Temari was lying with her back to the wall. She knew that she was being kept in what could pass as a 5-star hotel among jail cells, even being allowed to take a supervised bath yesterday, but none of that changed the fact that she was bored out of her mind. She knew what her fate was to be. Execution at worst, turned into a whore or slave at best. They had betrayed their alliance with Konoha, and she doubted that they would look favorably at that. The recent visit from the Hokage gave her a bit of hope though. The kindly old man who seemed utterly weak, though she reminded herself that deception was the rule among ninja, had told her that much due to her youngest brother's cooperation they stood a good chance of getting through this alive. Of course, that wasn't certain, and she could only hope that things would turn out fine. Kankuro was currently busy. Scratch that, he hadn't slept in 2 days, all the while reading a pair of rather interesting scrolls he managed to smuggle on a small tattoo seal on his arm. He wasn't foolish enough to think that they hadn't noticed, but since they hadn't confiscated them, he kept reading. Out of the 3 siblings, he was the one who was the closest to panic, so he drowned himself in work, avoiding any thoughts about what fate had in store for him. His work in puppetry keeping him occupied was the best thing he could think of. 23:35 Border Valley. The tired trio finally entered the small valley very close to midnight. One of the small side caves was soon occupied as they unloaded their basic equipment, and prepared to sleep, while Jiraiya set up a few alarm seals and Naruto left behind a few clones, while he himself summoned Gamakichi. He hadn't summoned him since the meeting before the exams, and he wasn't exactly proud of it. Enko had gathered dry wood, carefully picking out branches to make as little smoke as possible, and set up the fire in the cave, warming it up just enough to comfortably sleep inside, even with the winter weather outside. And, to those curious enough, yes, it is quite possible to make a fire that gives very little to no smoke, that is if you can pick out the exact wood for it. I myself haven't got a clue how to do that, just that the wood has to be very dry, because the damp one gives away thick black smoke. Naruto smiled at his sleeping godfather and girlfriend while he drew a bit of his blood over the summoning tattoo on his right arm, before calling forth his companion. The young toad looked a bit bewildered at the location and the cold, coming from warmer climates. "Hey Gamakichi," Naruto greeted while pulling out some dried food from his stash. "Hey, bro. What's up? You haven't summoned me at all," the small toad replied in a slightly angry tone, very reminiscent of a small child. "Sorry," Naruto answered, rubbing the back of his head, while smiling sheepishly, "we were in the middle of war, so I didn't want you to get killed there," he explained. Gamakichi calmed down at that, he himself remembering the news he heard from the larger toads that were summoned to Konoha. "Fine. Though I heard you played hero," the toad smirked. Details. Naruto laughed at the bluntness, and began retelling everything he did or heard others did to Gamakichi, the telling and laughter calming him down as much as a good night's sleep would. He also noticed Gamakichi eyeing a piece of candy he had brought out by accident, and offered it. "Want it?" he asked curiously, offering the small candy bar. Gamakichi looked at it with great interest. After all, there was very little candy on Mount Myobokuzen. "Yeah," he shouted, jumping at the offered candy and grabbing it between his webbed fingers, before tearing off the cover and munching on it. "If faith's free," he mumbled through his full mouth, bringing up quiet laughter from Naruto, who enjoyed watching his little friend eat, and gladly pulled out another candy bar for him when he released him. He went to sleep in high spirits, awaiting tomorrow to begin his training. Jiraiya was the first to wake, getting up and stretching his body out. Enko followed soon after, and Naruto awoke last. After a short breakfast, Jiraiya sat down with a piece of paper, in preparation of the training he intended to administer to both of them. He wasn't blind, and Enko's feelings for Naruto were obvious, as were his for her. He had to control himself from telling them to stop beating around the bush and get at it. A lecherous chuckle resulted from the thoughts of what would follow. However, if Enko stayed close to Naruto, she was a target as well, if for nothing else, to get at Naruto, meaning that she would have to grow stronger as well. A frown crossed his face as he chewed on a bit of meat. He didn't have a good picture of their level of skill, and without that, apart from a few tricks and chakra exercises, there was little he could do. A good fight should give me an accurate reading of their level of skill. He calmly waited for them to finish their breakfast before speaking. "Alright you two, there's a few important things to talk about," he started, pulling out a pipe rather similar to the one Sarutobi used. He added a little tobacco and lit it, taking a deep inhale. "First, Naruto. As you are now my apprentice, I intend to cram everything I know into that crazy head of yours. Ninjutsu, genjutsu, kinjutsu, chakra skills, tracking skills, even stealth, subterfuge and seduction skills. Everything, he seriously stated. You may not notice it, but Konoha has grown weaker over the years of peace, and we need another legend to raise morale and strike fears into the hearts of our enemies. Both me and Saratobi Sensei agree that you could be that figure. There's war on the horizon. Kyumo and Iwa are arming themselves, and the Akatsuki are after you, and every single one of them is a strength ninja with strength close or over Kage level. Naruto listened intently. He was aware that he was strong, but still. Orochimaru would have beaten him easily in an open battle unless he had an advantage. Any ninja who had years of experience over him combined with equal or greater skill would beat him, and to think, he had an organization of those going after him. A shiver went up his spine at the thought. Just one would be a problem, how about two, or worse, more? As he was lost in his thoughts, Jiraiya turned to Anko. Second, Anko. As you seem to be very buddy-buddy with Naruto here, he calmly stated with a wide grin, bringing up a very Orochimaru-like grin and stare from the young snake summoner. You are also a target, and as such you need to improve greatly as well. Officially, I'm not teaching you anything, only giving pointers. Unofficially, you're my second apprentice in all but name, and I will try and teach you all I can apart from two things. One is the Toad summoning contract, and all the special jutsu that require it, but I'm willing to help you develop new ones for the snake contract, he explained. And two? Anko asked curiously, feeling much like a child on Christmas morning. And the Rasengan, Minato's signature attack, which goes to Naruto. I can't teach it to you without either his or Minato's permission, and since he is dead, well, you get the picture. Jiraiya somberly finished, bringing about a nod from both. Now, we're going to have a spar under some very interesting weather conditions, he added with a grin that easily countered the one Anko wore a few moments ago, one that gave both very good reasons to worry. And indeed they had. Jiraiya led them both out of the cave while he left a shadow clone to work on something else. He guided them towards a steaming pool of water, no more than 15 feet in diameter. This is the new sparring ground, he pointed at the pool. You two will take turns at fighting me with everything you have. I will not hold back a bit against you, however I won't go for killing blows immediately. Jiraiya explained in a serious tone. We have a week here and I intend to make the best of it, he added as he walked over to the center of the pool. Naruto, you go first, and don't use radiance. While powerful, I want you to improve your other skills as well. Hi sensei, Naruto replied as he walked over Jiraiya, who only quirked an eyebrow at the respectful title. Naruto on the other hand wondered just how Jiraiya walked on the near boiling surface of the pool without burning his feet. He decided to constantly channel his chakra to his feet, creating a small protective cushion that while allowing him to walk, also protected his feet from the here, you learn fast. Now come at me with all you've got, he shouted at him, and Naruto obliged. On the sides, Anko was sitting down and watching them both very carefully, picking apart every move, and trying to adapt whatever she could. Jiraiya was right, and if she wanted to this, she would have to take it very seriously. Naruto summoned a single clone and sent him out of the ring, afterwards summoning another two who immediately attacked, while the original stayed behind to study the results. As the two clones moved near for a direct attack, Jiraiya used a kunai to slash at them with a grace he never would have thought he had. Naruto mentally reminded himself never to underestimate his enemies for their appearance or age. The Kage were usually among the oldest of their village and they were by default the most powerful. He frowned at the fact that Jiraiya left no opening, at least none usable to him. Wise move. Study your enemies from the sides, you never know when you might find a weakness that way, Jiraiya advised as he went through the seals for a jutsu. Naruto identified the last hand seal as a tiger seal, meaning that it would most likely be a fire jutsu. Okay, let's see what he has in store. Fire release, dragon's burning breath. Jiraiya shouted as he exhaled a long and continuous river of fire at Naruto. Naruto stood silent for a moment, before moving his hands quickly to a seal, while internally thinking, water release, water encampment wall. The large cylindrical barrier of water immediately rose to block the fire attack. You do know of that jutsu's weakness? Jiraiya asked while throwing another breath of fire at the fading wall. The wall collapsed, leaving behind what seemed to be a charred corpse. Seemed being the key word. Jiraiya smirked at the little bit of on-the-post tactics, correctly guessing that he created a shadow clone outside the barrier, and used substitution to replace himself with the clone. The only question was, where did the boy hide? The surface of the pond was clear, and the air as well. No way. He thought, utterly surprised that the boy would actually go for move as risky as submerging himself in near boiling water just to make sure he got the element of surprise. And indeed he did, nearly catching Jiraiya off guard, though the old man had to admit that it was only his years of experience and honed instincts that saved him from being hit by the large flowing sword as it threatened to slash him from groin upwards. Immediately moving to the side, he sent a hail of kunai at Naruto, who immediately blocked each attack with the sword, all the while charging at him. Jiraiya took the moment to notice that Naruto's skin wasn't cooked in the water. So he figured out how to shield his body from harm that way, and all in the midst of battle. And to think they actually called him the dead last in the academy. Damn, if he had been trained properly like those clan brats, he would have easily beaten Itachi's record for becoming an ANBU captain by now. Naruto silently charged at him, the two-handed sword moving at great speed aimed towards the Sannin's neck. Jiraiya easily dodged the blow, slipping a hit to the boy's gut with his knee. Naruto winced at the pain, but didn't stop or drop. He felt worse before. Now that the introductions are over, care to play for keeps? Jiraiya asked, while Naruto nodded in response, raising one of his hands to his chest. Naruto molded his chakra carefully, preparing to trigger the deactivation of every suppression seal on his body. Weights, chakra blockers, chakra suppressors, the works. A small crack of the neck was all that was felt, however Jiraiya knew better. Naruto learned at an early age how to hide his own chakra, and something told him that he could actually have a little challenge now. And he could finally have a good fight, something he didn't have since that time a few years ago when he fought against a team of 5 Nuke Nin. Ready? You old lecher? Naruto asked with a grin as he threw Quicksilver to his clone on the side and placed his hand over his heart. What are you planning now, Gaki? Jiraiya whispered to himself as a blade appeared in the boy's hands that made his eyes widen. The Song of the Wind, a weapon legendary among swordsmen, said to have been forged for the founder of Whirlpool, and the Uzumaki family, and that only one of their own blood could draw it from its sheath. Unlike many of the newer swords that relied on chakra or various other enhancements to give them strength, the song was truly unique. It was a perfect sword, seemingly weak and frail but sharp enough to cut nearly anything unaided. The metal it was forged from was a strange alloy whose composition was never recorded, but was hard enough to survive any blow to it. The Song of the Wind was one of a kind, and probably one of the world's scariest weapons, and it was now in the hands of Naruto, who apparently understood its strength very well, if the grin he was giving him was any indication. While Naruto lacked a style, his insane reflexes built by his radiance training and great speed made for a great combination, one he would be challenged to beat. Damn. He spoke in a low tone as he prepared for the fight. You asked for this, sensei. He spoke in a tone void of all emotion as he drew the blade with his right hand, keeping it at eye level. The tides had turned yet again. Enko watched with a mixture of pride and fear. Pride for her boyfriend's skill and ingenuity, and fear that he was going to get hurt. The training was very much reminiscent of what Orochimaru had her do when she was his apprentice. However, she never was strong enough to give her sensei a run for his money, and unless she was gravely mistaken, Naruto was about to do just that. With interest. Jiraiya spent the next 15 minutes dodging a veritable hurricane of blows. Naruto wasn't only using the blade, but the scabbard as well, adding strong swipes to the combination. He had more shallow cuts and bruises than he cared to count, and while Naruto couldn't land a single blow fully, the small cut still bled and weakened him, and his kunai did little to stop them. He wasn't given the time to use jutsu, and all those he knew without using any hand seals actually took time he didn't have to execute. Naruto was no longer playing around, all the restraints he placed on himself were removed. If this is his level of strength now, he thought as he dodged a blow aimed for his neck, only to be swept by another to his leg. Jiraiya landed on his hands, quickly moving to a handstand and dropping back on his feet a few meters away. I'm seriously scared to think how powerful he would be when fully trained. With that blade guided by his speed, I'm no longer his superior in close quarters. However, as deadly as he is, there are still openings I could use, not to mention the Sage mode. He lacks a fixed style, but his on-the-spot adaptability means he'd actually do better without one. That dance of ruin he showed was nothing more than a collection of special attacks following his normal speedy swipes. I know of a style that would fit perfectly into his usual way of fighting. Now if I could only remember how it went. Wait a sec, he's not using his radiance now, nor is he using jutsu, and if he can fight that well on instinct alone. What have I unleashed? At the same time Naruto was experiencing something strange, and rather unfamiliar to him. During several moments in the fight, he felt a rather strange sensation, but as soon as he tried to focus on it, it was gone. The strange and comforting feeling of emptiness, of thoughtlessness, engulfed his mind in short moments during the fight. He remembered reading something on the subject a while ago in one of the scrolls on meditation, that the pinnacle of meditation was a state of empty mind, as the scroll called it, when the brain actually didn't think, and only the instincts remained to guide the body without the mind sapping its strength. Time seemed to have slowed down in those short moments, only to immediately speed back up. The feeling of the sword in his hand was majestic. The blade almost had no weight, and every move he made felt natural, as if he knew what he was doing. If he was being honest, he was mostly swinging the sword around, without any style, and he had a sinking feeling that any proper swordsman would be able to block or break his moves. If he could keep up with the speed. Anko gaped at the fight in front of her. This was no longer a simple spar, but a real battle, and she understood that should she interrupt them, one of them could easily die. Absent-mindedly gripping the necklace Naruto gave her, she inwardly muttered, "Kick his ass Naruto." The final clash finally came. Both were tired, and Naruto's chakra was at a low from keeping his speed up. Jiraiya on the other hand was physically tired, but could deal with it as his chakra reserves were still nearly full, having only used a pair of fire jutsu and substitution a time or two, while Naruto was draining his reserves the entire time. Not bad Gaki, but you still lose. Now tell me why you didn't use any jutsu from your arsenal? Naruto smiled at the question. So you figured it out. Honestly, I was too busy trying to find out what was this strange sensation I felt in my head during the fight, Naruto said in a calm tone. Oh? Jiraiya asked in a semi-mocking tone while quirking an eyebrow. Empty mind, Naruto shortly stated, bringing another shock to the Sannin. Well, that's a surprise. You were deadly here, however here are the bad sides. First, your style of fighting so far focused purely on fighting a single opponent without any area attacks to strike multiple ones or a viable defense against multiple foes. Should you be faced by one strong enemy, I have little doubt you could outspeed them, however, 2 or more and you're toast. Jiraiya explained to the young Chunin, we'll have to work on that, and then there's the Rasengan, along with a few more choice moves and seals. Also, that chakra Artofiers could be upgraded a bit, Jiraiya thought out loud, while Naruto was getting slightly sullen. The old sage was right, yet again. Don't get too down Gaki, I have a few ideas how to fix those problems up. Your shadow clones will be working overtime. Now get, Jiraiya shoot him as he popped a small red food pill into his mouth. Anko, you're next. 9 o'clock, Konohagakure. Various locations. Kakashi sighed once more as his finger crossed the surface of the memorial stone. Your son is something else sensei, just like you were, he quietly mused, as a single tear came down his face. His fingers went over the names of his teammates and sensei. Obito, Rin. He sighed for the umpteenth time, idly remarking that he did that too much these days. It would do no good if he were to abandon the rest of his team, as Sasuke and Sakura could use some more training. He had the distinct feeling that the shit was about to hit the fan, and he wanted both him and his students to be ready. A loud cursing was heard from the main and only inhabited building of the mostly empty Uchiha district. Inside his room, Sasuke Uchiha was reading one of his family's scrolls, a history scroll more accurately. After the recent troubles, he thought it would be wise to take a look at his clan's records, hoping to find some usable information. Mostly he found nothing of use, a decade's worth of accounting, birth certificates, marriage certificates, and other nonsense. That is, until he found an ornate, ancient scroll hidden behind a fake wall in the archives, which turned out to be the journal of Uchiha Madara, the founder of the Uchiha clan and co-founder of Konohagakure. And what he read certainly wasn't good. Oh no, it wasn't good at all. 12 o'clock Border Valley, Naruto had watched the battle between Anko and Jiraiya with great curiosity. Anko was a far better fighter than he gave her credit for. The snake style, apparently pioneered by Orochimaru, was in its essence brilliant. It relied on improved speed and flexibility to bait the enemy into an opening that didn't even exist, and then strike fast and hard, aiming for almost any disabling pressure points and nerve clusters on the body. Add to that the constant appearance of snakes out of every opening of her clothes, and Jiraiya actually had problems fighting her normally. He did however neutralize most of the poisons he was injected with. Jiraiya had made preparations for fighting Orochimaru, and apparently neutralizing poison by using chakra was one of them. He was beginning to fully appreciate the genius that was the perverted sage. The sheer knowledge and intellect revealed in very few moments when Jiraiya drops his jokes and giggling to face an opponent seriously. Neither Anko nor him could have really won against him, and for all the boasting, he wasn't even using half his strength. However, his speed was greatly challenged. Of that he was sure. It would be several hours later that the three of them fully recovered from the spars, and Jiraiya finally finished the schedule for their training, not only for the remaining 6 days, but for the duration of the entire trip and likely afterward. Taking one final look at the 2 scrolls he made, he passed them to Anko and Naruto, both of them busy with a piece of roast boar meat. These are your schedules for training from now on. We'll use the last hours of jutsu training to learn new skills or improve on old ones. Naruto carefully eyed the piece of formerly rolled-up paper in front of him in abject horror. Combined physical and chakra training along with kenjutsu for 6 hours, followed by a short break to eat and rest, and after that a second battery of physical training and jutsu training after that. If Anko's expression was any indication, her schedule wasn't any better. Late that night Naruto sneaked out of the cave, and with a small light once more began reading the scroll his mother had left behind with the sword. My dear son, the sword you hold in your hands is the song of the wind, the last remaining legacy of the Whirlpool. I managed to save the sword when we escaped the invading forces years ago, and as it has been for 5 generations, now the sword goes to you. Know this, unlike many of the blades you will encounter, the song has no special abilities apart from its masterwork craftsmanship. Its edge will never dull or break, and it can hold off pretty much anything in combat, and it can cut anything, if the wielder is strong enough to do so. As you are reading this scroll, the song has accepted you and will dance and sing to your instincts in battle, guided by your will. It is too headstrong to be guided by any style, other than the one that comes naturally. Carry it proudly, my son, and may it protect those precious to you as it did for me. Kushina Uzumaki, you loving mother. He silently resealed the scroll and removed another one, this one containing a series of 3 extremely complex arrays. Now let's see how you made it, father, he muttered as he summoned a number of clones to keep watch. His eyes squinted in the limited light as he finished breaking down the first array, and it only took him the better part of 4 hours to figure out most of it. It's not like he really needed the night's sleep anyway, he knew full well that he could go 48 hours without any consequences. The first was a highly complicated version of a beacon of sorts, one that could apparently reach a person almost regardless of the distance. And it was bound directly to Namikaze's blood, making it impossible for anyone not of the family to use the array. Clever bastard, he silently mused while a wide grin covered his face. There was still a long time before dawn. Unknown to him, neither Jiraiya nor Anko could sleep. Jiraiya was thinking of the past, the second Shinobi War, and his last visit to Whirlpool. He had contacts there, but Shinobi were anything but popular among their people, and their samurai force was not to be underestimated. But that's not the only thing he was worried about. Why was Tsunade going there? What could have possibly possessed her to go so far north into hostile territory? His spy network drew a blank on the subject, figuring her destination only when she was nearly halfway there. Then there were the unsettling rumors about a monster that roamed the countryside. Though he gave little credence to such rumors, it was wise to keep an open mind about such things. Anko quietly got up and walked out, settled quietly into a blanket and watched Naruto studying. She couldn't put her finger on it, but she had a very bad feeling about this mission. Tomorrow noon found a downright exhausted Naruto barely holding on to Quicksilver as he dropped on the ground next to the campfire. Next to him was an equally tired Anko, who merely sighed and laid her head in his lap, while Naruto's clones prepared food. Jiraiya wasn't in a much better condition either. While his clones guided Naruto and Anko, he was training his speed and working on a few moves as well. "Lunch is ready." One of the three cook clones shouted and began pouring the stew into small bowls before passing them around to the exhausted trio. "So, where do we stand, sensei?" Naruto asked the question that troubled him for a while now, all the while stroking Anko's hair. "Yeah, Jiraiya-sama, I'd like to know that too," Anko added. Jiraiya stopped eating for a moment, thinking out what to tell them. "Honestly? Naruto, you're about low jounin in just about everything apart from your talent in seals, your chakra capacity, and your stamina. Those three are Kage level easily. And your skill with the chakra art gave your knowledge on seals a whole new avenue of use, one you've only scratched." Naruto gave a small smile, which was instantly sunk, "but don't get cocky, you're still a weak rookie compared to some of the people you will likely encounter. And your genjutsu skills are about mid-genin level. We'll have to work on those. Anko, you are about mid-jounin level in taijutsu and ninjutsu. ANBU class tracking and poison skills along with chunin level genjutsu skills. Your stamina is decent, high chunin, speed jounin easily. Strength, well, you're about as strong as he is without chakra enhancements. You lack any really strong attacks, but you mostly make up for them with your other skills. Apart from helping you develop new jutsu or teaching you some of the one I knew, there's little I can do for you, I'm afraid." "Don't worry," Naruto added, giving her a kiss as well, "there's still a lot to learn that could help, and I'll be there to help as well," he reassured her, not that she really needed. Anko knew her level of skill pretty well, but it was always good to get a second opinion. She still smiled at the offer, knowing that even if she told him not to, he'd still be there for her, something she also didn't mind at all. The trio rested for the hour, preparing for the next part of the day's training, Naruto being very eager to find out just what Jiraiya had in store for him and Anko. "Get up, people, time for training," Jiraiya calmly called as he walked out of the cave. An unseen smile covered his lips. He was really curious how long it would take the brat to learn it. 4 days later, Konoha, Hokage's office, Hiruzen Sarutobi carefully looked at the final draft of the treaty that he and the council put together. He had to admit that he liked it very much, and apart from the fact that they'd lose a part of their trade profit, Suna wouldn't lose much. But Konoha would gain quite a lot. He was well aware of the expenditures Konoha had, especially when it came to hard-to-manufacture resources such as glass, and sitting on the elemental country's biggest supply of sand, Wind Country, and by extension Sunagakure was the best at making it. Same rate of export for free to Konoha for a full year, and afterward trading glass at a reduced price. Combined with a number of wind jutsu that could have easily been acquired another way, it gave both sides a plausible and very much appeasing way of settling the conflict without further losses, and, seriously, people underestimate the value of such strategic resources. Everything from beakers to windows is made from it, and having a year's trade supply for free is no joke. Tongue sticking out, now, all he had to do was persuade the two daimyos that it is the best option, and compared to military retaliation for the invasion, it was a godsend. He was still angered by Orochimaru's machinations, and the fact that he played them by taking over the position of Kazekage, and further manipulated the Wind Daimyo into reducing the financial support for Suna. After that, guiding the whole thing into war wasn't hard. The council at first remained their pig-headed self, but after Shikaku and Shibi pointed out that if someone manipulated another village to attack them in order to weaken both, they were somewhat more willing to cooperate. Tiredly rubbing his temples, Sarutobi summoned a pair of clones to do the paperwork and sat down to read his favorite piece of literature. End of the week, Northern Borderlands of the Fire Country. From this point onward, don't drop your guard regardless of what happens. Jiraiya ordered, "We are entering hostile territory. From here on we're going under code names unless we're in a secure location. I'll be Toad, Naruto's Fox, and Anko is Snake." "Understood?" "Hi," came the simultaneous reply of the other two. The vast plain that stretched between the borders with Oto and Iwa was before them. Covered with light forests and crisscrossed by rivers, the borderlands were a lawless place that rarely saw the institution of government, and considering the vast population of a couple of hundred scattered in isolated homesteads and small villages, it wasn't really needed. Stopping here for any period of time wasn't an option, as the region was also frequently visited by Iwa mining teams escorted by full squads of shinobi. They would have to move fast, for the cover of snow wouldn't last long. "How far are we from the second border, Toad?" came the monotone masculine voice over the radio. 25 kilometers due north, came the reply. "We'll be there by midnight, and that's when we'll slip into Whirlpool, undetected preferably. We need to reach the trading post at Karakis, which is an hour further. One of my contacts is there, and he should be able to help us locate Tsunade," Jiraiya added. It had been 10 hours since they started running before the crack of dawn, and there were 6 more hours to go. The pace he had set was brutal and exhausting, however, it helped with their training, and he himself was used to such traveling. Naruto cleared his mind of his thoughts, opting instead to focus only on his surroundings. The snow-covered lowlands were beautiful, no doubt, but he wasn't looking with his eyes. The picture Radiance painted was something else indeed. The echo of the surface of the world around him, combined with the soft glow of life. It was truly a unique perspective on the world around him. And much to his pleasure, the lands were void of any human presence. No matter how good they were, there were very, very few who could fool him. He still couldn't shake the sense that he was being watched all the time, and wondered whether someone was truly watching him or if it was his paranoia coming to bite him in the behind. Time flew by quickly as they moved, all but invisible in the snow with their features covered. The weather had improved, if only slightly, as the snow stopped falling and the skies cleared, so when night fell, the stars and moon gave just enough light for them to move at half speed. Anko noted when they reached the border that Jiraiya had already taken the loss of speed into account, and that he chose to cross the pass that represented the border by night. "Snake, Fox, I see a light in the distance. That is the Iwa border camp. Hide your chakra and move to the left wall, 20 meters up. We'll walk right over them, keep close, as of this moment until we leave the pass we are on." Radio silence. Anko heard Jiraiya's whispered orders over the radio, and turned off her connection as soon as she spotted the camp. Soon, both signatures faded away, and she decided to rely on the tracking skills her hated sensei taught her. Channeling a bit of chakra to her eyes while dropping her right hand into a hand seal, a small snake popped out from her coat, easily coiling itself like a necklace around her neck. Anko's eyes changed as well, turning from their normal brown color to a slitted yellow. She smirked as the darkness turned just a bit clearer, and she could easily tell the heat silhouettes of her two companions in the darkness as they moved up the pass wall. At the same time in the camp, a trio of guards were slacking off and playing cards. "Hey Ganji? I'll take 1 inch," asked the first one of them. "Yeah. 2 for me," answered the other. "What do you think they're digging in those mines?" "Raise by 50 Rio, damn me if I know." Following, Ganji responded, "I've heard stories about some ruins being there." The third one decided to chip in, "I've seen them hauling some old chests with scrolls inside them, along with tons of gold bars." "Weird, I tell ya, Kami knows what the Uchiha wants with those scrolls. They're full of gibberish from what I saw." Little did the 3 ninja know that 3 people were watching and reading their lips, noting the information away for later. The team moved with great stealth over the camp, maintaining a low, yet constant speed until they were out of hearing range. Jiraiya knew well that the two could easily see in the dark, so he waited until they were at a safe distance before giving them a few hand signs, which they both interpreted as an all-clear for their radios. Naruto snaked a hand through his hood, and right behind the ivory-white mask, flipping the near-invisible earpiece back on. "Fox, Snake, do you copy?" "Snake here, reading you loud and clear." "Fox here, over." Naruto quickly replied to the hail, and, yes, believe it or not, it's actually called a hail. "We're in the clear, speed up a bit, and as soon as we're out of the pass, unless something comes up, we can go back to normal traveling. Also, Snake? Report back on the news." Ape might want to know. Naruto made a short smile on the name he used for what could only be Sarutobi. Anbu animal names were very useful as they gave very little identity to their bearers. Although he was pretty sure that the names Snake and Fox were hardly as popular as some of the other, still, he'd set all such thoughts aside, as they now finally reached the edge of the pass. "Fox?" Jiraiya asked, demanding the status of the surrounding area. "We're in the clear. 150 meters in all directions," Naruto quietly responded. "Alright, move out. We have ground to cover, and 8 hours till dawn." It would be only 4 hours before they reached the first signs of civilization, a small town on a riverbank surrounded by a wooden palisade. Karakis was a surprisingly small place, 24 buildings huddled together around a road that led to a gated bridge. They were still a kilometer away from the hamlet and covered by sparse woods when they stopped. Jiraiya was the first to remove both cloak and mask. "Alright, from here on, we travel without the cover of masks," he calmly stated. "We need to enter a few inhabited areas, and these disguises will attract even more attention than going in like this. But, that doesn't mean we won't use some simpler ones." With that said, he pulled out a small scroll and unsealed a large bag from it. Rummaging through, he pulled out various articles closely related to theater. Various clothes, makeup, ribbons and jewelry, all real to Naruto's surprise. "Come on. Here's an act you won't mind playing. Naruto, Anko, you are 2 newlyweds who are currently traveling with their uncle to Nadara. Pick out appropriate clothes, choose names. Something that doesn't attract attention," he explained as he pulled out a pair of scissors and began cutting his long hair to a very short length before pulling out a small tube. Naruto watched with interest as the man pulled out a small bucket and used a quick water jutsu to gather some water in it before he poured a small amount of the thick black substance into the water. He gave it a few seconds to dissolve completely before applying the paste to his hair and his eyebrows. And much to Naruto's surprise, the hair quickly started turning from white to grayish, with parts being completely black for show. Anko wasn't in the least surprised, being far better aware of such methods to conceal one's identity. He quickly proceeded to apply a powdery substance over the facial markings he had on his cheeks, completely hiding them from sight. As a final touch, he used a pair of colored lenses to give himself brown eyes instead of the normal black. A few more finishing touches, a scar here and there, and it was nearly impossible to directly recognize the face of the Toad Sage. As you've probably noticed, there are times you can't use henge or any other jutsu for that matter. At times you'll have to go in like this, wearing actual makeup, a disguise, and a false identity, Jiraiya calmly explained to Naruto. Now, I want you to try and create your own. Now that was something he could work with. With a wide grin and all of his pranking creativity behind him, he turned to the clothes in front of him. He knew that he lacked the experience that Jiraiya had, but some things could be easily made up by the application of the right skill, namely his personal favorite, the Shadow Clone Jutsu. Immediately summoning one, he got on the job, using a simple henge to shape the person he wanted to become physically, making slight adjustments every few seconds. When he was finally pleased, he summoned another with the instructions to try and replicate the look. The clone gathered some water again, using a different color, red this time, to dye his hair, carefully sliding small amounts on the other parts of facial hair. The same powdery substance covered his whisker marks now, and a simple addition of a very obvious, but false scar over his right cheek made it distinctive enough. That combined with a tanning cream used over most of his body produced interesting results. Jiraiya was truly impressed by the boy. He did ask a lot of questions about the tools presented to him, from what some of them did, to asking if a certain thing was at his disposal. It wasn't the work of a professional, sure, but he had talent for that as well. He had carefully picked a long-sleeve traveling coat, nothing too fancy, but durable. Now, he had free-falling short red hair, green eyes, a skin of a darker hue, a scar over his left cheek, and a simple gray traveling coat over normal clothes. The final touch, even if invisible, were his chakra suppression seals, which made him little better than a civilian. In other words, he was completely undetectable. Kazaki Myohu, former guard at your service, Naruto responded in a slightly different voice. Anko had made similar choices, letting her hair fall down freely, but going against dyeing it, choosing a small bow to add to her hair, a long-sleeve dress with an overcoat to go with it and elegant boots to cover her feet. Kazaki Yume, loving wife of Myohu, Anko stated with a formal bow and a shy voice. Naruto stood impressed and dazzled. Anko now had a simple beauty, like a wildflower that had just bloomed. He also wondered where the hell did the comparison come from, as he certainly wasn't feeling poetic. He sneaked over to her ear and whispered, "You're really beautiful, you know that, my love?" Anko smiled and kissed his cheek lightly, and whispered back, "I know." Their kiss fest was interrupted by a clap of hands, which quickly turned into an applause. "Nicely done, Yume," Myohu, Jiraiya commended. "Just so you remember, I am Kazaki Takani, Myohu's uncle and traveling herbalist. We are moving north to Nadara in search of better opportunities at life. Now, remember, act like civilians and hire it," he ordered, then stopped for a moment, rummaging through his scroll case and picking out one particular scroll. "Catch," he threw the scroll at Naruto. "It's a normal katana, one you can use without worries of revealing yourself," he explained. "I have a few kunai and senbon hidden in the sleeves, along with a few vials of poison well hidden in the clothes," Anko added after finishing the modifications to her clothes. Naruto strapped the blade to his waist, and a chuckle escaped his lips. He looked like one of those wandering samurai, or ronin. A rather entertaining notion, he had to admit. "And, from this point onward, until you are informed otherwise, Naruto, Anko and Jiraiya will be going by their false identities, which means a bit of unusual behavior for them. Shall we, Yumiheim?" Myohu asked in a kind, loving voice, though very little of it was faked. "Hi," Yume responded as the two began walking towards the trading post, quickly followed by the elder Takani. An untrained observer would only spot a trio of tired travelers slowly inching along to the north. And that is exactly what the guards at the palisade gates spotted. Sensing no danger from them, they gave the three a short nod as they passed through the gates unopposed. Myohu was pleasantly surprised that the small town had cobbled streets, and was actually a very pleasant place, even if there were hints of past scars. The homes and small shops were built in a style very similar to that of Konoha. They walked in relative silence to the only inn in town. "The Copper Drake?" Yume stated curiously. "Hi, this is where we'll be staying, lovebirds," Takane commented, to which the two youths forced slight blushes, not much, but just enough to be natural. The gaki's a natural at acting, though you'd have to be to survive in his shoes. Takane somberly, but proudly thought of his student/nephew as they entered the inn. "Hello, and welcome to the Copper Dragon," greeted a rather exhausted voice of a young man. "Would you like a room?" he asked in an almost hopeful voice. "Yeah. 2 rooms please," Takane asked and was given a pair of keys, each apparently for a room, first floor, second last and last room from the stairs. "Names?" the young man asked again, this time calmer, offering the guest book to sign themselves in. They wrote down the false names without a second's thought, and proceeded to check their rooms, only to hear a shout, "And careful with that sword." The rooms were simple, as good as can be expected of a small town in the middle of nowhere. A pair of futon in each room, a window, and a shared bathroom between the 2 rooms. It was no great luxury but just enough for a comfortable stay. Yume and Myohu were left alone in their room by Takane, much to the couple's pleasure. "You know, we do have a lot of free time before we have to go," Myohu whispered in a husky voice as he snaked his arms around Yume's shoulders in a warm hug, kissing her neck. He wanted her very much, but would willingly wait as long as she wanted. He loved her too much to hurt her. "Hold your horses, loverboy," Yume whispered back as she turned his head to kiss him on the lips, and whispered, "Fun now, but the full deal when we go back home, okay? I don't want to risk someone finding us out now. There are too many enemies here," she assured him while turning around and laying a deep kiss on his mouth. Myohi softly pulled her down onto his lap as he sat against the wall. Yume merely cuddled into his form, her body finding great comfort in his warmth. Next door, Takane smiled at hearing their words. He would never admit it, but he envied the boy. He also idly mused about passing some of his work to him for, educational purposes. And with a quick prayer for their health to whatever gods choose to listen, he returned to his work, going through a long scroll covered in thick, but neat writing. 1600 hours, Konoha, unknown location. Danzo sighed in annoyance. Things weren't going according to plan, that much he knew. Naruto Uzumaki, no, Namikaze, had slipped from his fingers and had claimed both his name and legacy and was being trained by Jiraiya, and much to his irritation bringing back Tsunade to be the next Hokage. His entire plan for the future was ruined. However, Danzo also wasn't a fool. One does not survive on the battlefield for as long as he did without learning a great deal about strategy and patience, something he had in abundance. He always preferred to pull the strings from the shadows. In a small stone office, he was sitting before a large desk covered by a map of the elemental countries, with several large, thick folders over them. His focus was now placed over a small territory to the north, stuck in between cloud and stone. With a small smirk he pulled out a pair of blank scrolls, wrote a short letter on each and raised them. From the shadows, 2 agents of his route stepped forward. "Make sure that these are delivered safely to the Raikage and the Tsuchikage," he commanded in his usual quiet, flat tone. "Hi, Danzo-sama," the 2 shortly replied. "And so it begins," he gave of a dark chuckle, oblivious to a third shadow that sneaked out of his headquarters. 1730, ANBU headquarters, INT division, "So these are the 2? Ibiki asked. Yugao Yuzuki shortly nodded as they both watched the 2 root ninja who were now bound, blindfolded and gagged inside their own prison cells, stripped of most of their clothes and all weapons and/or tools. The finely trained experts of Konoha's interrogation and torture division were good at what they did. The 2 prisoners stood very little chance, and the letters they gave already implicated both them and Danzo in what could only be called treason. "Very well. Inform the Hokage of your catch, and I'll personally report as soon as they spill their guts." Sigh, for once, I wish Anko was here, then I could easily wrap this up in an hour and go home. Ibiki was indeed tired. During the past few days, a number of prisoners were brought to him, and out of them, 5 were from Root, all sent on long-term missions to Kaminoshware. Not really, he used genjutsu to go through 3 of them so far and found out where they were supposed to be going, but there was something that worried him. He had seen the features of all there somewhere, but he couldn't place them. It wasn't the bingo books, he was sure, as it was the first place he checked. Did he work with them at some point? No, they were too young. The oldest was 15 years old. Their bodies carried many scars, one such as he would easily and accurately connect to torture. They were brainwashed into perfect little soldiers. He wanted to puke at the idea. He made copies of all the seals that were placed on their bodies for further study. Ibiki Marino had an idea, one he wanted to pursue very much, one he knew the Hokage wouldn't give much support for unless his arguments were rock solid. Grumbling once more, he walked over to his office and the ever-growing stack of papers on his desk. Just how the hell did the Hokage deal with the paperwork? 1745, Konoha, Sarutobi Estate. Konohamaru loved his family. He was always certain of that. Asuma, his chain-smoking uncle, Hiruzen, his perverted grandfather, and Aiko, his grandmother. Even his late parents, the people he never really met. He loved them all, and they loved him in turn. The dinner they sat down to was a downright loud event, with Konohamaru retelling the events of the past few days at the academy, and even the new pranks he pulled, something that Aiko vehemently opposed publicly, but here, in the safety of their home, she laughed very much like her husband and son. He is becoming very much like Naruto in certain aspects. Sarutobi mused as he pulled a smoke from his pipe. Both good and bad, he gingerly added to his thoughts. Najiji? I was wondering if you could help me with my bojutsu tomorrow? Konohamaru asked in a quiet tone, very much different from the usual boastful voice he used. Asuma was curious too, as the boy had been mostly training on his own. From what I read, bojutsu has been a family tradition since your great-grandfather, and my skills stink. The elder Sarutobi quirked an eyebrow at his request. And why do you want to learn it? Hiruzen asked, almost expecting the usual wannabe Hokage answer, yet remembering that he had changed. It could be anything. I want to protect this place like you, grandfather. Hokage or not, I still want to protect it, Konohamaru answered in a low, but determined tone, bringing a smile to the other 3. I'll be glad to show you, grandson, Hiruzen replied in a warm tone, as Asuma ruffled the boy's hair. Predictably enough, the boy scowled. Stop that. It's embarrassing, he shouted, and why else do you think I do it, Ko? Asuma added, further teasing the boy, much to the elder couple's entertainment. The laughing went on for an hour more as the 4 of them chatted, and Asuma retold some of his more entertaining missions. Much to Konohamaru's pleasure, Hiruzen smiled tiredly at the sight of the remnants of his family. The Sarutobi clan once counted 36 members. Sadly, all but the 4 of them died during the Third Shinobi War and the Kyubi attack. He was deeply gladdened that his grandson had begun taking matters seriously. 2100 hours, Karakis, the Copper Dragon Inn. Night had long fallen over the small trading post, its stores closed and the few villagers safe inside their homes. Apart from a small riverside tavern, all life had died down. Within the walls of the inn, Takani watched the 2 sleeping, Myohu sitting propped up against the wall with Yume in his lap, unconsciously stroking her purple hair. A small grin crossed his face. He would kill him for what he was going to do, but it was too much of a chance to waste. Putting his thoughts to the side, he quietly coughed, pleased by the barely visible twitch of the 2 bodies that informed him that the 2 were wide awake, and waiting. It's time, Takani quietly informed them, and within moments, the 2 bodies belonging to Myohu and Yume untangled themselves, and got up, both perfectly ready. To his well-trained eyes, it was obvious that the 2 weren't civilians, and any attempt at their lives that night would have ended, painfully at best. They silently nodded and schooled their features into those of their masks, and soon enough, a young couple walked out of the room, followed by their old uncle. Myohu once more checked all the hidden weapons on his body, a full set of Senbon needles concealed in his sleeve, a number of shuriken in the coat, and of course the katana on his side. And finally the sealing array which kept his chakra in check, ready to be released within a moment's notice. He idly noted that Yume and Takani did the same as him before they walked into the tavern, as inconspicuous as the next group. Takani went to the bar, and after a short word with the bartender the trio moved to one of the tables in the back, well shielded from the others by the nearby bar. They sat in relative silence, each enjoying their own drinks and a bit of food as they waited for the elusive contact that was supposed to meet them here. After a few minutes, Myohu broke the silence. "Tell me, uncle, what's it like up north?" he asked in a curious voice, while Takani gave him a calculated one, as if asking, "What the fuck are you doing?" "It's been years since I've seen Gramps, ever since he moved." "What's it like there?" he continued, much to Takani's annoyance. However, the barely visible moves his hand made told him a different story. Chunin. IWA. Chunin. 3 tables left. "Keep talking, smart brat. He's getting into this quite well already," he thought as he began talking, explaining to the naive youth about the north. The two enemies were none the wiser as a somewhat drunken figure made its way towards the bar, sitting right next to them. Myohu noted that Takani had forcibly drained most of his drink. "Hold on a second, I'll go get some more," he commented to the two, and barely brushed the man. He came back a few seconds later with another bottle of sake, gladly pouring himself another saucer as he waited for the drunken man to leave, signaling the two that he was the contact and to keep quiet. Yume had already been studying the two enemies, putting their faces together with the information she had neatly memorized. Any sane ninja above Chunin rank knew the bingo books by heart, and she certainly wasn't foolish enough to make such a mistake. However, those two were in the books, marked of as the Emerald Siblings, Cho and Sei, and even though they had low chakra, they were dangerous enough to warrant an crank reward from Kyumo for their heads. It would be best if the two were avoided, it would waste time. She notified the two of it, and with a nod, they slowly, and in visibly good mood left the tavern after only drinking and eating a little. Both visibly stiffened when they left the building and heard Takani's voice. "Myohu, go to the inn and get our belongings. We're waiting for you outside the village near the bridge." Myohu silently nodded and walked off. "That settles that. Yume, I need you to follow him and see if someone will follow," he quietly ordered. "I am worried about those two you noticed. People of their class don't wander for nothing. You really have to, feel free to use your full power." Both of you, Yume nodded, and proceeded to stealthily follow her red-haired husband with great care not to reveal herself. "Now to figure out our next move," Takani mused as he hid himself in the shadows and proceeded to read the contents of the small package in his hands. And his assumptions proved to be right, as Yume found out. The Emerald Siblings were after Myohu. The only thing was, why? She proceeded to silently trail them as the young man went to the inn, not once revealing any trace of real skill, even tripping a few times on the rocks in the dark. Could they have seen through his disguise? No, they would have either fled for reinforcements or attacked him by now, so what are they after? He knows, that I'm sure of. So let's see what kind of trap does he lay for them. Myohu indeed knew that the two were following him, and he did everything in his might to shake the two off, until he was able to read their lips and discern their intentions. Slavers, as he found out, well, those two are in for a very rude surprise. I wonder what kind of reward would Konoha give for having the two of them alive. Time to implement my plan, he idly mused as he moved into the inn and passed the nearly sleeping attendant. He hurried off to his room, and withdrew his right sleeve, revealing his summoning tattoo. A second later, his friend Gamakichi showed up. "Hey Br." Gamakichi tried to greet when a hand covered his mouth, with Myohu keeping a finger over his mouth. The toad nodded in understanding and he removed the hand. "Nice looks," Gamakichi whispered, "goes with the job. I need you to deliver something to Jiraiya and Anko as inconspicuously as possible," Myohu explained as he passed a hastily written scroll to him. Hi, just don't get killed, right bro?" Later, Gamakichi saluted as he left, leaving a smiling redhead. Oh yes, it was time to have fun. He could swear he heard the old pervert laughing at his idea. It was funny. He wondered how the authorities in IWA would react to having the two of them beaten by an apparent civilian. Mayohu proceeded to pack up their few belongings into scrolls, and pulled out his sword. The simple katana was a good weapon, for fighting civilians, beasts or simple guardsmen. Not shinobi, so he decided to give it a small boost. After all, a civilian needed more time to pack, didn't he? He calmly walked outside, his left hand holding the small bag over his shoulder, and the right one holding the sword between the sheath and the handle. "Can I help you?" he quietly asked the two nin that were following him. He finally got a good look at them as they walked out. Both were dressed in rather form-fitting chain armor that easily covered most of their bodies, easily going over cloth pants and coats covering it all. Both were wielding staffs. "You could go peacefully, Cho," the male sibling answered. "We just want to sell you for the money, you'd make a good slave," he added with a smirk. "Oh? A pair of ninja? This wouldn't be a fair fight, I'm afraid," Mayohu lamented, and the two laughed. "I mean, just the two of you stand no chance of beating me," he commented in an equal voice as he dropped the bag and gripped the handle of his sword, awaiting their attack. "Look sis, the little samurai wants to fight us. Just shut up Cho and let's finish this. I want to get that young wife of his as well," Sei responded with a low voice, clearly angry. However, little did she know what she just unleashed. Mayohu's eyes hardened, just as his grip on the blade tightened. Even in his growing anger, he still let the enemies make the first step, silently swearing that it would be their last. Cho chuckled and charged, with Sei right behind him, both wielding a staff and preparing to hit him on the head. They weren't even using chakra. "Focus, prepare." The two drew closer and Cho took a swing at him. Mayohu began to sidestep the attack, draw, slash, punch. He moved through his defenses effortlessly, landing a single slash against his chest, moved behind him and elbowed him in the back of the neck. He preparing for the next move. Spin, slash. Sei barely had the chance to react and slow her charge when Mayohu began a spin, and the blade swung straight at her, cutting right through the staff she carried and hitting her across the chest, breaking the armor open. The wound was shallow, but she was now on the ground and the blade was pointing at her neck, with barely a few millimeters in between. "Yield or you die," Mayohu spoke in a deathly calm voice, all the while channeling brutal amounts of killing intent. I yield," Sei spoke in a frightened voice. Who the hell was this guy? He beat them with nothing more than his sword? Sure, they didn't use their jutsu, but they were still supposed to be stronger than him. "Then sleep," Mayohu added and hit a pressure point near on her neck. Her world faded to black. Yume smiled at her husband's actions. He did better than she expected, and without using any chakra at all. "The true weapon of a ninja is deception," she mused while a cruel smile spread over her lips. How she wished she was home now. She jumped over there and helped Mayohu tie them up, and waited as he summoned Gamakichi. The little vested toad appeared once more with a wide smile on his face as he chewed on some sweats. "Hey bro, see you managed to bag M." Gamakichi greeted. "Very funny, Kichi. I need your advice on something. Can your kin help me transport these guys to Konoha?" Mayohu asked him. Gamakichi took a thinking stance, with a webbed foot, hand, appendage, whatever, under his chin. "That will cost you," he quietly answered, to a laughing Mayohu, who immediately pulled out a small bag of candy. "Will this do?" "Hell yeah!" Gamakichi shouted as he leaped on the bag. "I'll call Gamakan over to carry them. He's at least easy to convince." "Where do you want them?" "ANBU headquarters. I'll attach a small scroll that will tell them what they need to know." "Fine. I'm off." Gamakichi replied and vanished in a puff of smoke, along with the bag of treats for him. Mayohu quickly pulled out a scroll and with the speed earned from his constant working with seals made quick instructions for the two. Konoha could always use some information on the other villages. Not bad, Gaki. Takani called from his perch on one of the roofs. Now let's get out of here and leave the summons to handle it, okay? Hi. Don't get a heart attack, you old geezer, Myohu replied, waving him off with his hands. No respect for elders. Takani spoke with fake tears in his eyes. In a few moments he calmed down. Move out. We're heading to the north, he commanded in his usual voice. The two nodded and moved out. And, end of the disguises, although I may use them again. As soon as they left the small village behind, Naruto thanked Kami for the chance to return to his usual clothes, the comfortable ants and shirt, and the white coat that went over them, along with the bracers and leather gloves that guarded his hands. Damn, it feels good to be me again, he whispered unheard in the cold night wind. He finally released the seal that was keeping all of his chakra back, and cherished the return of his sight. The white cloaks returned along with the three masks and the radios. Fox, Snake, this is Toad, do you copy? Snake here, reading you loud and clear. This is Fox, all clear, Naruto responded as the three of them began moving. Listen carefully, Nadara is under siege by the samurai army of a local warlord, and to make things worse, Tsunade and her apprentice Shizune are there, along one of Orochimaru's outposts. We have to reach the city by tomorrow night, assist and extract the two of them and if possible help the city out. Just follow my lead, and I'll hand out further orders when we get there. With a tired sigh, Naruto went on. 24 hours without sleep and going. 7 o'clock, Konoha, Office Hokage. The collection of people that were gathered at the early hour were interesting to say the least. Far from the usual meetings, the people present here were only those that Sarutobi Hiruzen deemed worthy of his complete trust. The original Ino Shikacho trio, Hayashi Hyuga, Sarutobi Asuma, Kakashi Hatake, Mato Gai, Ibiki Marino, and to everyone's surprise, a very, very worried Sasuke Uchiha, holding a scroll. Now that we're all here, care to explain your findings, Sasuke? Hiruzen asked in a grandfatherly tone. The others were curious at the question, and while many of them assumed that the scroll was important somehow, no one had the idea just how important it was. Sasuke was for the final time considering whether this was a wise decision. He was giving up clan information, and although he didn't want his enemies to know his strengths and weaknesses, this was for everyone's sake. His own included, as he seriously doubted that Madara was going to be friendly towards a member of his dear family. A week ago, I was searching through the clan archives for information that may be of use. The various things I found were mostly useless apart from a journal of sorts, and a short work on the Sharingan, both written by Madara Uchiha. He began in a calm voice. However, the dates in the journal didn't make sense until I read both scrolls. In reality, the Sharingan has 3 levels, the normal one, a second stage called Mangekyo Sharingan which is brought about by great personal loss and give access to new powers, and a final stage, the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. I can personally guarantee that Itachi possesses the second stage, as he paused for a moment to overcome the feelings of rage and loathing. He used it on me. However, that's where things get worrying. The third stage grants agelessness. He spoke in a worried tone now, fully aware of the implications of his words. Madara Uchiha survived his battle with Senju Hashirama in the Valley of the End, and is still alive. And why are you so certain of this information? Hayashi doubtfully asked. Because he also left one final entry in the journal, dated to a little more than 14 years ago, just a week before the Kyuubi attack. I quote, "I've finally found it. In a week's time, Konoha will burn for their betrayal, and my cowardly family will finally be purged from the face of the earth." An immediate silence descended on the room. Am I the only one who finds this to be awfully convenient? Shikaku asked. I know, Sasuke was the first to answer, so I checked for the obvious. The Sharingan is perfectly capable of copying handwriting just as it's capable of copying jutsu. However, you don't get to copy individual letters but whole words. Also, the scroll describing the forms of the Sharingan had ink that was completely dry, and had started to fade away. In other words, it was old. As an added fact, I've gone through most of the clan records and histories. When Madara first developed the Mangekyo first, he had started going blind over time. In an attempt to save him, his brother willingly gave up his eyes, so that his brother could see. Care to guess what happened? Sasuke rhetorically asked. That's too many coincidences. Inoichi added, agreed. Hiruzen spoke, and there is one person who could confirm all of this. But for now, the question is, what do we do about it? 12 o'clock, Whirlpool country, 5 kilometers south of Nadara, my god. Naruto quietly muttered at the sight before him. War is never pretty, Jiraiya sadly mused, while Anko simply nodded. Naruto prepared to jump further when a hand on his shoulder stopped him. Before we go, Naruto, there is something you must understand. Jiraiya spoke in a quiet, but serious tone. Should we help these people, you can be certain that you will gain a position in the bingo books. It is completely certain that there are several factions overseeing the situation here. Do you understand what that will mean? Naruto didn't turn, and waited a few moments before replying. It means that I will once more be hunted by my enemies. He spoke in a serious tone, but what kind of a ninja of Konoha would I be if I was scared away from my duty so easily? He added as he walked off, eyes locked at the sight in front of them. Nadara was burning, but the battle was still raging. They had very little time. With a final move, he unsealed the Song of the Wind from his palm and vanished. Do you think we should be worried for him? Jiraiya asked Anko. No, I don't think so. This isn't a desire for killing or revenge. She stopped for a moment. I think he sees something there, something he wishes to protect, something he's willing to lay down his life for. Unknown time and location. Presumed to be present. 6. Report. A voice that seemed as old as time ordered. It left no room for argument in its tone, and promised a swift death to those who would argue. The room was circular, or at least it seemed that way from the little light that illuminated the center. Along the edge of the corner were 10 seats, the people on them hidden by shadows. The person referred to as 6 walked to the edge of the white circle of light, making only his feet visible, high. The experiment was a success. 6 spoke in a confident and pleased tone. The results, however, weren't as fortunate. The base exploded and burned down 2 days ago. Still, I managed to deal a blow to both villages beforehand. Excellent work. 6. 7 and 8, you are to locate your second target. 3 and 4, continue with your missions. 6, take the week to rest and then join up with 5 to capture the second in Kumo. 9 and 10, the 9th has been located in Whirlpool. Pursue and capture him, the same voice ordered, and 2 out of the 10 shadows simply faded into the darkness. The leader, the man who had spoken the entire time and give orders, intertwined his fingers under his chin. A cruel smile crossed his lips as he began laughing. Naruto threw off his white cloak but left the mask on as he held the sheathed blade of his katana in his left hand. Right behind him were Anko and Jiraiya, both fully ready for combat. So what's the plan? Anko asked. The tension was palpable as the group charged into the area. We secure the breach first, help clear out as many of the troops inside as possible, and locate Tsunade and Shizune, Naruto replied, never turning back, completely focused on the battle ahead of them. Sounds good. Any ideas how to seal the breach? Jiraiya asked. I could set up an earth wall. I have a better idea, but I have to check if it works first, Naruto replied. However, I still need you to cover me for it. Anko, can you make sure we don't get taken out? Easy. So, do we charge in or sneak in? She asked, barely hearing the soft chuckle coming out of the mask. You sneak in. I'll provide the distraction. Give me 5 minutes, Naruto answered in an even tone, one that hid the smirk on his face very well as he vanished. He never told them the last part of what he saw. And he doubted he would. They would soon see for themselves, but he felt the rage burning in his gut one more. the same one he felt all those months ago when he helped save the people of Wave, and Gato showed up. Why do I get the feeling that all hell is about to break loose? Jiraiya quietly asked as the two of them started waiting. Indeed, all hell was about to break loose. Sensha Kame was a lord, the feudal ruler of a small piece of land to the west of Nadara. Mostly he hated the city for the simple fact that they took the brunt of the commerce in the region, and thus the brunt of the profit, for themselves, while he was stuck with a deal that he viewed as unfavorable. So, he did what any like-minded tyrannical despot would do, he raised an army and went to conquer it. A dozen or so hired ninja made the job significantly easier. After all, a bunch of people who specialize in destroying walls are always welcome in besieging armies. Kame wasn't a superstitious man. He didn't believe in bad omens and similar nonsense. He didn't really believe in ghosts and demons either, thinking them the foolish stories told among lesser people, such as his serfs, slaves, and ninja. But, the sight that he was seeing before his eyes were enough to wipe away any such doubts. Nearly half of the army under Lord Sensha's command was still outside the city, while most of those inside were beginning to break ranks and plunder, neither group spotting a third one heading towards their back. Many of the soldiers still on the outside suddenly dropped their swords as they felt an unnatural rush of wind, and raw fear gripping their bodies. Some of the more experienced made small cuts on their hands, using the pain to get a hold of themselves, and it worked, for a short time anyway. The wave of fear spread even further, quickly reaching the walls when the first footsteps began echoing. At first it was a few steps, but soon enough it turned into dozens and then hundreds of sounds, as if an entire army was running towards them, but the small hill down which they were coming was suspiciously empty. And then it came. First, a chain of explosions came from the right flank of the army, killing more than 100. Said explosion was instantly followed by screams from the back as men were cut to shreds by white, masked figures who would appear for a moment and vanish in the next, leaving nothing more than a bleeding body. However, among all of those specters that walked was one figure dressed in white, a pale mask covering his face as the song of a mournful choir echoed in the wind. The figure held a blue katana, still sheathed, and pointed at them, completely silent. The battle had stopped, the battlefield silent apart for the wind and the song. One of the lesser officers charged at him, but was cut down by a figure that once more appeared for no more than a moment, kneeling behind the victim with a drawn, bloodied sword. Only to vanish immediately afterward. Murmurs began spreading through the army, the question on everyone's lips was who the man was. The song suddenly stopped, and the single visible person spoke, in a cold, maliciously sharp voice as a thick mist began descending on the battlefield. "Legion of the White Wraith, attack," he shouted, as he himself vanished, and reappeared in the middle of the enemy army, sword drawn and bloody. The battle cry resounded across the plain, joined by the ghostly voices of the newly named Legion of the White Wraith, sowing terror and death across the battlefield. "Kami." Anko whispered, eyes wide in shock as the ghostly figures descended on the panicked army. "Come on, this is our distraction," Jiraiya added. He was shaken by what Naruto had done, who wouldn't be? Naruto had figured out a way to engage an army which was numerically superior at 500 to 1, and he had a damn good chance at winning. It only now dawned to him just how well Naruto understood the most powerful weapon of the ninja. Deception was deadly, and as shown a single ninja could be more than a match for an entire army of non-shinobi opponents. And in the end it no longer mattered whether he could win or not, he spread panic through the enemy ranks, and created a distraction that would probably stop the troops inside, while buying them the time to move through the fray unharmed. "Let's go, Anko. We don't have the time to loiter around," he ordered when he noticed that she wasn't yet moving. Anko finally nodded and followed him. How much was there that she didn't know about the man she loved? She realized that she didn't know, but swore to learn everything. Naruto sighed tiredly after about 5 minutes of work. The art of silent killing that he picked up from Zabuza was still just as deadly, and combined with his clones, the invisibility jutsu from Jiraiya and proper intimidation, it was downright fatal. He vaguely remembered a text he read a long time ago on the art of psychological combat. As a kid, he chanced upon it, and didn't understand it a bit, but he still read it. Now he understood it perfectly, and applied it just as well. Sow fear among your foes, disrupt their ranks, take out the commanding officers, and when they're brought to their weakest, strike quickly and decisively. Still, he and his army of 100 avoided killing whenever possible, leaving more than 3 of the 500 alive, but either wounded or unconscious. He had no time to check. There was no mercy for them when he avoided dealing killing blows. He simply didn't want to handle the combined memories of a massacre done by his clones. So, he left the clones to do the fighting while he walked through, fighting only those that stopped his progress. The general of the army was ahead, and he was at the top of the chain of command. Take him down and the rest of the troops will be easy to defeat. There were those he had to save. Now, his lone figure walked towards the surviving troops, the bloodied sword unsheathed in his right hand, while the sheath, equally bloodied, stood in his left. The troops had recovered. Mostly, the palpable presence of death that he exuded still scared them. With good reason too, for Naruto had sensed the hastily erected slave camps near the city walls and saw the line of people being led there. No mercy, he whispered in his changed voice, immediately followed by the rest of his army. Lord Sensha cursed loudly at the fact that half of his troops were taken out by an unknown enemy and that the almost finished siege and conquest of Nadara was now turning into a bloody defeat. Most of the surviving Nadara guards were in the old fortress that once belonged to the Uzumaki royal family, in the days of Whirlpool's old glory, along with nearly a half of the populace. His own men had finally managed to get the siege machines ready to breach the final defenses and obtain victory. However, he still had his ace up the sleeve. "Akari, what the hell is going on?" he asked the leader of the mercenary ninja he had hired. Akari was a tall, very pale and very thin ninja, formerly of Takigakure, until he and his group were forced to flee after their less savory activities were discovered. He was a veteran ninja, however, he was also very greedy, and his main reason for joining the attack under Sensha's banner was the promise of slaves, and looting of the fortress of Nadara. The enemy, whoever it was, certainly was a ninja. He sensed the usage of chakra, and the sheer pressure of his killing intent. And the rather horrid story one of the surviving officer told about an invisible army, and a man leading them was more like something out of a fairy tale, but he knew better. Now the only question was, what kind of jutsu the ninja used, a ninja, and a skilled one at it. "Takai, Fengak, with me. We deal with the ninja. Kijo, you lead the others while we're gone," he quickly ordered, and jumped at the open field, followed by the other 2. Within the fortress, 3 women surrounded an unconscious 4th. The first of those was a blonde, seemingly in her late 20s, better known as Tsunade Senju. The second woman was her apprentice, Shizun. However, it was the third and the 4th woman present that were truly interesting, if for nothing else, for the fact that they were almost entirely identical, aside from the fact that the one that was still standing looked a decade younger, and the older, unconscious one had a large array of seals covering a great deal of her skin. The doors of the room were suddenly opened and a young soldier crashed in. "Lady Tsunade," he shouted, trying to catch his breath. "Kaishasama needs to see you immediately." "Did he say why?" she calmly asked, never turning from her patient. "There seems to be another army engaging the invaders," he almost hesitantly answered. "An army?" Shizun asked the young woman next to her. She had shoulder-long red hair and blue eyes, and a tired smile that marred her otherwise beautiful features. "All right, tell Kaisho I'm coming," Tsunade answered. She was tired, her chakra was exhausted, and things were going from bad to worse. How she let this slide so badly out of control she'd never know. Akari threw his calculating gaze upon the lone figure that moved towards the walls through the remnants of Sensha's army. It was a curious one, dressed all in white with a bloodied sword, yet the clothes were completely clean of blood, and the malicious gaze of two blue eyes behind the mask sent a shiver up his spine. He immediately realized that he wasn't fighting an ordinary ninja, and he wasn't even sure that it was one ninja. While he could only notice one, he also felt around 60 other signatures roaming around. He was still at a safe distance, atop the walls that surrounded the city, and observing him as he charged at the small area where one of the two generals that led Lord Sencha's army was situated, his ghostly legion quite easily cleansing the area around him. He spotted them at short moments, a flicker here and there. Shunshin, he accurately identified it. A few moments' observation confirmed his thoughts that all of the chakra signatures were of equal strength to the one that was visible. Clones then, and he's using some sort of jutsu to make them invisible. Not a bad move altogether. He's not a weakling, and if I had to guess, a jounin most likely. Besides, if these are the shadow clones that I think they are, then this guy is from Konoha and came as support for the slug Sannin. And I doubt they would send a weakling. However, a guy this strong would have surfaced in the bingo books already, so who the hell is he? Fengak, Takai, engage the enemy. Just gauge his strength and play it safely, this guy is no joke, he quietly ordered to his two subordinates. He needed an accurate estimate, and simple soldiers were useless for that. Toad, two ninja on an intercept course with Fox Enko communicated over the radio, read you loud and clear. Fox can handle them. Proceed as planned, Jiraiya responded, I see them Toad, and I'll handle them. You take out the third one who's watching me from the ramparts. He's just a bit left from the breach and about jounin in strength. Naruto joined the conversation over the radio. Roger that. Toad out, Jiraiya finished. Well, a single target, even jounin at strength would be sorely challenged against him. Enko smirked at the comments. Well, no one could say anything if she had some fun on his mission. It was her job, after all. Her enemies were rarely left alive to speak of it, but Enko kept a lot of hidden weapons on her, and every single one of them was laced with a variety of poison, that, or a rather potent explosive tag, courtesy of her boyfriend. However, her pride and joy was a far different weapon, one she hadn't used in a long while. The figure of the self-named White Wraith stood perfectly calm as he waited for the two enemies. The Song of the Wind was gone, the blade Quicksilver was in its place. Naruto wasn't overly concerned, he used the chakra storage seal on his chest to restore his chakra back to its original level, and only suppressed it afterward to hide it. He learned his lesson well, he would never underestimate an enemy. The two were completely quiet as they approached him. He had expected taunts, attempts at making him reveal information, but the only thing that he got were two very focused enemies. He took his time studying the two approaching foes. This would not be as easy as the last fight he was in. The first one was tall, but bulky, a large two-handed axe was strapped to his back, and the green-gray plated armor he wore made him look more like a normal warrior than a ninja, but he knew better, the barely visible etchings of seals on the surface of the armor was a dead giveaway. He also seemed to favor his right leg, but that could have easily been a ploy. There was no Haitayat anywhere, nor were there any identifiable markings, a real mercenary. The other slightly shorter, but seemed to have no weapons apart from a single kunai. He was of lean build, and apart from his relatively light bluish clothes. The way he juggled the kunai between indicated that he was probably ambidextrous, but the obvious lack of any seals or other markings left him with a little concern as to what his skills were. Genjutsu? Ninjutsu? Hell, even some styles of taijutsu were a real possibility. He would have to be careful. The three of them stopped for a moment. Naruto wasn't sure if they were aware of the remaining 60 or so clones in the area, but he would have to use them regardless. He couldn't afford the risk. That and a few new moves. He immediately tensed up as he noticed the larger one take his axe, spinning it a few times in his hand, like it weighed no more than a feather. Ready Fengak? The bigger guy asked the smaller one, right before he prepared his first attack. Naruto inwardly cursed as the man disappeared from sight and moved his hand to block the blade that was coming from his back, blocking it effortlessly just before it reached his neck. The blow struck him as an odd one, as the axe didn't strike with nearly as much force as he expected. Was the enemy toying with him? Not waiting a moment longer than necessary, he molded his chakra into his free right hand, and tried slamming a paralyzing palm into his enemy's gut. However, he moved away with a speed he wouldn't have expected from a bulky foe, while his partner began going through hand seals. Time to cheat a bit more, Naruto mused as he substituted himself with one of his invisible clones and sank into the ground beyond their line of sight, watching as Fengak unleashed a torrent water needles upon the unfortunate clone. Haku used that move if memory serves. A ninjutsu user, Naruto reminded himself from the safety of the ground, as the projectiles hit many of his clones at the same time. Maybe he should give them a reason to fear him. Hidden mist jutsu, he mentally uttered as he and 20 other clones rose from the ground in a circle around the two, the rising mist concealing them perfectly. 10 clones moved to engage each of them while the original remained perfectly still, in wait to study their reactions and strike them down. Takai, the axe wielder, smirked as he sensed the approaching clones. "Not gonna work, bastard," he shouted as he leaped at the nearest group, his axe bursting into flames and slashing through 5 of his clones instantly. As an added effect, the burning blade of the axe dispersed the cover of mist around him. Fengak was no easier apparently, as the 10 clones sent at him were easily disposed of by his single kunai, without even once resorting to jutsu. The calculating, cold gray eyes were staring straight at him through the mist. So, one of them uses fire and the axe, while the other is very skilled at close range and uses water jutsu, and is able to see through the hidden mist. Interesting, let's see how they handle this dance of ruin, Naruto loudly intoned, preparing one of his new moves. He heard Takai shouting, "Fengak, get ready, he's about to do something." Naruto was focusing all of his chakra into the 3 critical points for his move, the eyes, the legs and the arms, death of 1,000 cuts, and, "Sorry, I just had to use it," tongue sticking out. Fengak smirked at the name of the move, expecting some sort of long-range attack as that was what most of the would-be swordsmen used these days. However, he was in for a painful surprise as Naruto appeared right behind him. 100. He whispered as Quicksilver slashed through his armor on the back, not even giving him the time to react. It was then that Fengak realized just what the attack did, as he felt 100 razor-sharp blades cut across his back. The cuts were shallow, but he was almost afraid to look, knowing that his entire back was a bleeding mess now, but he still had the presence of mind to move himself away from the next blow via his own shunshin. "A shame," Naruto loudly commented, letting a sliver of irritation slip past his emotionless mask. "I was hoping that would work, otherwise I'll have to resort to more unpleasant moves." It did harm his back considerably though, so it wasn't a complete waste. "That axe of his is interesting though, I'll have to get it once he's down and out." He grinned under his mask as he immediately switched his attention to the other man, leaving a single clone to handle the previous victim. He quickly realized that his previous prediction was wrong. The water needles he used were a low-chakra jutsu, and what soon followed finally gave him a good idea what kind of an enemy he was. The landscape around him melted away, to be replaced by a nightmarish sight of twisted flesh and monstrous fangs as a massive beast appeared before him. He felt a shiver run up his spine as he watched the beast move towards him. A genjutsu, damn it, the one thing I'm not good at. Think, how do you disable genjutsu? Pain? Not gonna work on this, it would have to be a lot of pain. That's it. A strong chakra pulse should do the trick, Takai snarled at his enemy's skill. He already realized that they were sacrificed to study a stronger opponent, he only wondered just how the hell he didn't figure it out sooner. Now, he was looking for a way out that leaves him with his limbs attached to his torso. Preferably alive as well. Fengak was still bleeding from his back, and the lack of the blood pills he usually carried meant that he was going to die from bleeding in a while. He promised himself to drag the bastard to hell along with him. A feverish grin covered Enko's face as she watched the now helpless Jounin be injected with a variety of poisons as Jiraiya searched through his belongings, looking for any usable information. Akari fought against the poison with all his will and every skill he could think of, but nothing worked against the staff that the crazy woman was holding in her hands. A staff made of 5 intertwined snakes, which were still as stone for the entire length of the handle, only turning live at the end where the heads were, and that end was holding all of his limbs down, while the heads had bitten him, injecting various toxins into his body, and ensuring a coming death. She wasn't overly worried about him, regardless of his skills. Any fool that allows himself to drop his guard so much as to not notice her coming deserved to die a stupid death, and it did help that she was Konoha's resident stealth specialist. Jiraiya frowned slightly when he finished going through the man's belongings. While the stuff he dug up was useful, it was also rather irritating. The fool held onto a few smaller scrolls and some papers, likely blackmail and self-protection material, along with several rather interesting maps of Whirlpool and Earth countries, with marked-in locations of slave labor camps and markets, something he'd have to deal with at another date unfortunately. He knew full well what kind of a problem slavery was in the northern countries, and he also knew that IWA more than just supported the notion of slavery, while Kumo practiced it, but rarely, as they liked their alliance with Kiri, who abolished slavery decades ago, and didn't tolerate it in any of their allies. "Come on, Snake, stop torturing the idiot. Fox is making a show," he quietly ordered, making the purple-haired Kunoichi pout. Jiraiya shook his head. At least she wasn't his problem. How Naruto got along with her so well was beyond him. Enko mumbled something, but settled with watching her boyfriend and unsummoned the snake staff, perching herself on the ramparts and watching the battle go on, unaware of a pair of eyes watching the battle from above. Naruto had vaguely sensed his audience as he dodged another blow from Fengak's axe, the burning blade cutting through the air just in front of him, while Takai apparently plotted something while pelting him with Sanban and Shuriken. Considering who was watching, he decided to give a bit of a show, and try out the newest move he added to his style, this one based on the original teachings. He dodged yet another blow, and noted that for all his skill, Fengak was growing weaker with every passing moment from what he was certain was blood loss. At least he would give the man a death in combat, regardless of whether he deserved or not. Focusing a large amount of chakra into his feet, he leaped away from them, both hands gripping the handle of the blade that was above him, as his memory recalled the path. Calm the mind, still it. Let the feeling of the world around you enter your mind's eye. Focus only on the target, neither the move, nor the weapon. Focus solely on the moment of the cut as you gather and unleash your strength. Dance of ruin, he intoned as he prepared the last of his strength, holding his breath, aiming all of it at the healthier of the two, glorious heavens dividing edge. He uttered the final words, as he felt every shred of thought leave his mind, entering a calm state of nothingness as the world faded away to his speed. The only thing he felt was his arms move as he slashed through his enemy, and that lasted for a split second. He never saw what happened to Takai as he appeared about 10 meters behind him and released the breath he was holding. The tendons on both his legs and arms were slowly healing, but they would be of no use for a serious combat in less than 10 minutes, and along with multiple small gashes on his skin which were rapidly healing, he needed to end the battle now. Fengak wasn't nearly as fortunate, as he watched his partner being cut cleanly in two, a straight, diagonal cut through both his arms and his body, hitting straight through the heart and leaving him dead within moments. The bloody spectacle before him left him shocked to the core. He didn't like the guy, heaven forbid, he was a complete and opportunistic bastard no better than him, but still, that could and still might be him. And that idea didn't settle well with his long-term plans such as survival. However, such thoughts were cut at the root as a glowing kunai embedded itself into his throat. A final thought passed his mind before he died. He had let his guard down. "So, let me get this straight," Tsunade stated, rubbing her aching temples. "You are telling me that Jiraiya is here, along with someone that is apparently his apprentice and another ninja of the leaf?" The figure of the old Lord Kaisho looked at her intently, offering merely a nod in return. "And they are coming for me? To bring me back to Konoha?" Another nod. Apparently, Kaisho wasn't a man of many words. What Tsunade did know, was that he was a man of great wisdom, and had a great store of knowledge both historic and current, which he could always easily access, and was willing to share with anyone he named friend, like her. In fact, it was he who invited her here, requesting her healing skills to handle what he called, strange case. Indeed, her patient, for all her familiarity, was anything but ordinary, and for once, she was damn glad that Jiraiya was near, she could actually use his help. Apart from the Genesis rebirth seal on her forehead, which she developed with his help to provide the basics, she knew next to nothing about them, medicine however, in that she was the best, just like Jiraiya was the greatest expert on seals she knew, and Orochimaru was a genius when it came to ninjutsu. The situation of the familiar red-haired woman was beyond her, as such a thing shouldn't be medically possible, but the work stank of Orochimaru, so she conceded on the part. Somehow, he didn't have that much of a problem when it came to the impossible. Then again, the term impossible rarely held up to scrutiny in the shinobi world. The apprentice has already defeated over half of the invading army, Kaisho offhandedly commented to the rather surprised Sannin. While his master and girlfriend apparently are taking care of the other half. My forces are presently retaking the city with ease as the remaining 1,000 soldiers are demoralized and their esteemed leader knows next to nothing about battle tactics, he explained, saying in one conversation more than he did the entire day, once more leaving Tsunade with a growing headache. She knew that every student that Jiraiya had trained turned out to be either great, or dead, most of the times both, which considering their profession, yet again, was hardly odd. In fact, the Sannin, along with their sensei Sarutobi, were an aberration in the ninja world, for the sheer age they achieved. Jiraiya was smirking all the way towards the central fortress, as he was accompanied by a now unmasked Naruto and a rather cheerful Anko. He listened to small everyday talks between the two, mostly focusing on simple things, such as food, fun and the choice of ideal weapons for assassination. Yep, perfectly normal. Now if he could only get some good material for his books, the day would be complete. You know, I've been wondering for a while now. I've read everything there is about Tsunade, but there were no mentions of her character apart from her loyalty to Konoha. Could you tell me more about her? Naruto suddenly asked him. Jiraiya had frozen in place at his question, very much surprising the other two. You okay, Jiraiya-sama? Anko asked in a slightly worried tone, and barely noticed the quickly hidden note of pain on his face. It's something I would rather not discuss, Jiraiya softly replied, and the two quickly picked up the "please don't ask any more" tone in his voice. Naruto realized that whatever happened between the two of them had hurt him, and that it might be something that he hadn't come to terms with yet. He almost chuckled at the fact that even he had a few of those. They proceeded to quietly walk towards the fortress, the remaining soldiers of Whirlpool either ignoring them, or and more frequently, greeting them as saviors and pointing them at shortcuts towards the fortress, or good taverns where celebrations would be held apparently. Naruto watched the city intently, absorbing the appearance that was so different from Konoha. The buildings were mostly stone, but that made little sense to him, as Whirlpool was a frigid country, so it made him curious how they kept them warm. Also, most of the city had buildings topped at 3 stories, probably for the same reason, only several buildings, that he assumed were either temples or guard towers, along with the fortress were taller. The city seemed old, ancient even, and there were many hints of past glory. A large park they passed by had visible irrigation systems, along with others that kept sufficient warmth for any species of plant to grow. There were old homes that he was pretty sure predated the ninja era and the Sage of the Six Paths. He spotted what seemed to be shops, all boarded up to protect the goods hidden within, many of the boards taken off as the invading forces looted and pillaged. Most of the corpses of both allied and enemy troops were at the walls, where the fighting was at its worst. However, there was still the occasional body here and there, and what truly sickened him that most of them were civilians. While such deaths were expected, they weren't truly needed. The civilian population, while marginally larger than the invading army, was still no real threat to them. And that, he mused, was probably the truth of war. He promptly decided to get his mind to stop thinking about things so depressive and turned to the prospect of finding a decent ramen shop in Nadara after the whole mess was over. Unlike him, Anko was more than used to being in other cities. An assassination and infiltration expert would normally get missions that took them away from home, so she did what her instincts honed in countless missions told her to do. She subconsciously spotted and noted every single area that might be of importance for later. There was little more time for that as they were approaching the fortress, which was in itself an impressive sight. It went around any style known to her, its high walls and towers that seemed to stretch onto the heavens, all built of a black rock that seemed harder than granite. The massive triple gates at the entrance, slits for arrows along with a fine collection of catapults, ballistae and other less recognizable weapons that graced crenellated positions along the walls of the castle gave a very sharp impression that whoever built the place intended to make it impossible to conquer, but to also make it a viable retreat for the general populace of the surrounding city. If she had to guess, the fortress probably had stores of food, and an independent water source of its own. The halls of the fortress were surprisingly warm to the trio as they walked toward what was once the throne room, where their meeting with the lord of the city of Nadara would occur, and where they would also find Tsunade. Out of the three it seemed that Jiraiya was the most worried about the encounter, and the other two couldn't figure out why. The guards they passed by were mostly calm, although many of them offered a smile, as it was obvious they were coming in peace, and it did help that their leader stated that they were safe from them. It was even more amusing to them to see the curious and grateful glances of the civilians, most of them awed at watching three figures of apparently epic and mythical power. Ninja weren't a common commodity here, and most of them were outright hostile. To have not just a few, but a total of 5 capable ninja present and on their side, was more than a little surprise to them. Jiraiya had adopted a decidedly bland expression on his face, perfectly calm at the coming conversation. While he cared a great deal about his longtime teammate, there were still a few things left unanswered between them. And before he allowed himself to bring her back to Konoha, even if she was willing, she'd better provide good answers. The hall they finally entered smelled of age, stone arches held the roof, tapestries and statues decorated the wall while a large chandelier illuminated the room. The throne was apparently empty, while a man they assumed was Kaisho the All-Seeing was sitting by a large table, with Tsunade on his left and Shizune on his right. While Kaisho had a mixture of a pleased and calm look on his face, and Shizune was generally happy to see Jiraiya, Tsunade had a substantially darker look on her face, and a small sliver of gladness to see her old friend again. "Ah, welcome Jiraiya-san. It's good to see you again," Kaisho greeted in a friendly tone, while Jiraiya smiled back and bowed. "It's good to see you again as well Kaisho-san," he greeted back. "Hello Tsunade, Shizune." Tsunade responded in a flat tone, while Shizune nodded with an apologetic smile. "I see you've brought some brats along. Isn't that Orochimaru's former apprentice, Anko?" Tsunade asked, tone never changing, even when she noticed the visible flinch. "Good, I could use her help as well." "And who's the blonde brat?" At this point, Naruto, who was gently massaging Anko's shoulders to calm her down, almost snapped. This was the legendary Tsunade Senju? The woman they were supposed to bring back as the next Hokage? Talk about a disappointment. If he didn't know better, he'd think she was a drunken gambler or something. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, he snapped at her, which did bring about the desired effect, and a surprise. "Did you just say Uzumaki? Are you by any chance related to Kushina Uzumaki?" Tsunade once more asked, hope obvious in her voice. Now curious, he slowly nodded, only to be startled as Tsunade leaped from her seat and grabbed him by the hand, drawing him away. "No time to explain, follow me," and she went off, leaving a somewhat stunned Jiraiya and Anko. "What was that?" Anko managed to mutter. "Damn me if I know," Jiraiya replied, scratching his head and trying to figure out what the hell was happening. Thankfully for him, Shizun was there to offer some help. Just follow them, Jiraiya-sama. It's much easier to show than explain, she demurely explained to the puzzled pair, as she guided them to a bedroom not that far away. Imagine Jiraiya's surprise when he saw a crying yet thoroughly mad Naruto kneeling next to what seemed Kushina Uzumaki? And Kushina Uzumaki? Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share this video with your friends. Guys, make sure to help the author by visiting the link in the description. This is Fox Sage, and I'm signing off.